States. You're not just risking the lives of your citizens, you're risking the life of every citizen on American roadways if there's an unlawfully issued California commercial driver's license, because these truckers drive around the country. And so with California, about 25% of their non-domiciled commercial driver's licenses, these are driver's licenses that have been issued to foreigners, 25% were issued unlawfully. We were able to cajole, push California to revoke 17,000 of those illegally or unlawfully issued driver's licenses. So thank you to California for doing that. Another concern that we have with California is that many of the drivers are non-proficient in the English language. By the way, the rules I'm talking about are not rules that Derek and I created or President Trump created in this administration. The rules that we're talking about are rules that go back decades. These rules were here under Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg. It's just they didn't enforce the rules. But in regard to English proficiency, California is the only state that has refused to enforce our laws where a commercial driver speaks English, can understand English. That's important on the safety front, number one, because if there is a crash, you have to be able to communicate with law enforcement. What's on your rig? Where are you going? There's basic information that law enforcement needs or first responders need when there's crashes on American roadways. But they also have to understand American roadway signs. So it's a safety issue that many administrations have flagged, and we want to make sure that if you're going to operate a big rig, you operate it and you understand the English language. Here's the concern that we have, is that many of these operators, and many of the press has covered this, they don't speak English. They can't understand English. So it begs the question, how did they get a commercial driver's license? How did they get through the system if they don't understand the language? And that's prompted us to look at the commercial driver's license mills, the CDL mills. Businesses that stand up and they're pushing drivers through, in air quotes, their training program, which is no training program at all, and allowing them to go to the state DMVs and get a driver's license. This is incredibly risky because, one, not only do they not speak the language, but we're seeing that they're not well trained. And if we're going to have drivers on American roadways, they need to be the best trained, the best skills, because if operated incorrectly or inappropriately, these are lethal weapons on American roadways. And especially at a time as America is about to travel. We think about this every single day, but America is about to hit the road for this Christmas season. They're thinking about it. And so in California, again, 25% of their driver's licenses were issued illegally. 17,000 were pulled, and we are grateful for that. But it brings me to the reason we're here today. As we've done this nationwide audit, we found the worst offender, which is the state of New York. 53% of New York's non-domiciled CDLs were issued unlawfully or illegally. Now, what New York does is, if an applicant comes in and they have a work authorization for 30 days, 60 days, 1 year, New York automatically issues them an 8-year commercial driver's license. That's contrary to the law. That's one offense. But we also found that New York many times won't even verify whether they have a work authorization, they have a visa, or they're in the country legally. So they're just giving 8-year commercial driver's licenses to people who are coming through their DMV and sending them out on American roadways. And again, they're endangering the lives of American families. I don't like that I have to do this, but the law requires me to do this. I'm going to give New York 30 days, because that's what the law requires, to come into compliance with the rules that have been long-standing at the Department of Transportation. If they come into compliance, we're going to work with them. If New York refuses to come into compliance, because Kathy Hochul, for some reason, believes that we should have unqualified truck drivers on American roadways, we are going to pull tens of millions of dollars as phase one for the state of New York. We don't want that to be the case. We don't want to have conflict with New York or California or Minnesota. That's not the mission here. The mission is to get compliance, to make sure we have safe commercial drivers on American roadways and Americans are safe. That is the mission. But if we have state governors who are unwilling to cooperate and collaborate and make sure that Americans are safe, we will use every single tool at our disposal to make sure they do come into compliance. And if they don't, the federal taxpayer, the American taxpayer, should not be funding these states. So we will pull every dollar possible from every single state that's unwilling to work with this administration and these long-standing rules to make sure that when an American and a family gets in a car, they shouldn't be worried that they have an unqualified foreigner operating an 80,000-pound big rig that could endanger their lives, by the way, or an unqualified driver operating a motor coach. Again, if you get on a bus, you're going to travel across the country, you'd expect that that driver has been well-trained and they're well-qualified to operate that vehicle. We've seen in recent news stories that that's not the case, and when bad drivers that aren't qualified from other countries drive a bus, many people get hurt and some people die. We find that to be unacceptable, and again, we will use every tool at our disposal to make sure that this ends. With that, I do want to turn it over to our administrator of motor carriers, Jarek Bars, who's done a fantastic job. He's been crushing it for us. He also is former law enforcement from Florida, knows these issues very well, and has led the motor carriers team remarkably well. He's kind of the rock star of DOT. He's going to talk a little more about New York and maybe a little bit about California and these CDL mills that we're seeing pop up across the country. Derek?
Thank you, sir. Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. At FMCSA, I want to make sure that we talk about our mission first. Our mission is clear and it needs to be unwavering, and that is to reduce crashes and injuries and fatalities involving large trucks and buses on our highway that the Secretary has mentioned. A critical piece of that mission is making sure that well-trained, properly vetted, and fully qualified commercial drivers are only on our highways. What we uncovered in New York is not an administrative oversight. It's a systematically, grossly unacceptable deviation from a federal safety regulation that has been on the books for a long period of time. These are the rules that ensure only qualified drivers are on our roadways. When states fail to follow, the safety is compromised, and we at FMCSA, we're going to act on that. And as the Secretary mentioned, during our 2025 annual program review, FMCSA found that more than 53% of the non-domiciled CDLs that were issued in New York failed to comply with federal law. For context, New York has reported that more than 32,000 non-domiciled CDLs are currently active. I want to highlight just two of these examples from our audit to show you exactly what that negligence looks like. First, a driver was issued a CDL in February of 2025 with an expiration date of May of 2032. But their work authorization expired in May of 2025. That's just 3 months after the issuances. Yet the CDL remains valid for nearly 7 years beyond the individual's lawful presence in our country. There's a second example, and even more concerning to me in this particular case involving a driver issued a CDL in September 2025 despite having a work authorization that expired 5 months later in April. So in other words, New York decided to issue a commercial driver's license to someone who was lawfully present with it was undocumented. He should not have been here. These are not isolated incidents. They reflect two systematic failures in the New York licensing program. New York's system defaults to an automatic 8-year expiration for non-real ID domiciled CDLs, regardless of the actual lawful presence of them being in our country. This means New York blindly issues CDLs that expire long past the expiration that drivers lawfully should be in this country. So secondly, the audit uncovered numerous examples where the state of New York relied upon expired lawful presence documents to issue CDLs. So I want to be clear with that. New York has issued non-domiciled CDLs to drivers whose lawful presence documentation was already expired. So keep that in mind. These are current and long-standing federal safety regulations that the Secretary has already mentioned. These are not something that are new. These are safety standards that every state is required to follow. Commercial drivers operate in the largest vehicles in the country on our roadways. When improper licenses are issued, safety is compromised, and we cannot uncompromise safety. It's very paramount of what we do every single day at FMCSA. So New York must immediately pause the issuances of non-domiciled CLPs and CDLs. They need to conduct a comprehensive audit of every non-domiciled credential that is issued. And then they need also void, rescind, and reissue all licenses that were not issued in compliance with federal law. So by regulation, as the Secretary mentioned, they have 30 days to respond. If the state does not take those corrective actions, dollars will be taken away from their highway funds. So compliance and safety is our goal. We want strong, reliable state partners who share a commitment with us in saving lives, because one loss is way too many. But 53% failure rate is unacceptable, and FMCSA will not look the other way. So the American public expects and deserves to share the road with people who are properly vetted, and we have qualified drivers on our roadways. So highway safety should not be an option, and neither is compliance. So we look forward to working with the state of New York so they will come into compliance to make sure our roadways are safe. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
We'll take your questions in just a moment, but I want to highlight an additional point. There's a lot of politics in Washington, a lot of political fights, a lot of disagreement in Washington. This should not be one of them. Everyone, a Democrat and Republican, when they get on American roadways, they want to be safe. They don't want to have unqualified commercial drivers on our roads. This is not political. And again, there's a debate about what we do with those who have come into the country illegally. I have a viewpoint. I share the viewpoint of the president. And Kathy Hochul, Gavin Newsom, they may disagree with the president. That's beyond the point. What we're talking about is something very, very different. If you come into the country illegally, or you have a short window of time in the country, should you actually be entitled to a commercial driver's license where you operate on American roadways? I think the answer to that, every American would say no. We only want the best qualified individuals operating on American roadways. And as a base level set, you want to speak English because this is about the safety of all of us who travel. And so I want to be clear, this is not about politics. This is about good government. This is about safety. And this is about the right people to operate these really big rigs that are challenging to operate, and you need to be well qualified on the American road. So with that, we'll take questions. Grady?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. One question on this and then an unrelated topic. My first is, I know you reviewed 200 of these cases. Do you have any sense of how many of these licenses were issued illegally and if it would impact the shipment or movement of goods across the country?
So, and Derek will correct me if I'm wrong. The total percent was 53%. Was it 23,000, Derek? Or
They have issued 32,000
I was close.
non-domiciled. And so during our investigation, during our audit, we found it 53%.
So assuming that rate is the same, you would expect at least 10,000, maybe more, to be revoked.
If you're basing it off of the numbers what we found.
And would that impact shipment of goods across the country?
Go ahead.
Well, at the end of the day, it's about safety. And carriers, good carriers who are out there who are employing drivers are going to ensure that they are safe, and they will work together with the shippers to ensure that we have goods that are moving across America. But at the end of the day, it's making sure they get there safely.
We do have capacity, right? We're not again. We're coming into a season where there's a lot of little packages that are shipped around the country. That's important. We don't see this as impacting the ability to ship products across the country. And I think the main point is we're going to do it, and we're going to do it safely. Can I just make a side point on this as well? A non-domiciled CDL, in its original vision was if you go from one state, you're a resident of New Jersey, and you go to Texas, you could get a non-domiciled CDL in Texas because you're a resident of New Jersey. It was for American citizens. Like many things, this law has been contorted and has now been applied to people who are foreigners coming into the country. And again, it's been carte blanche, let everyone get a commercial driver's license. It's a great way to make a living, give everyone a license, and the consequence of that is real for families who lose loved ones on our roadways. But you had a second question.
The Defense Authorization Act, the House version essentially strips a lot of the safeguards that you and the NTSB have supported. Are you urging the Senate, have you had any conversations with members of Congress to put that language, or I guess remove that language from the bill that ultimately gets passed?
So as a former member of Congress, I have due respect for the body. They're going to work their will. I'll just tell you this. My first full day on the job was the DCA air crash. And I will not let fixed wing and rotor traffic cross in this airspace. We control the civilian airspace at the FAA and at the DOT. And so let the Congress work their will, but we are going to drive safety no matter what happens, because that is our space. And that's my viewpoint. And again, if I know there's a debate happening, it's one that Chair Hamidi has done a great job talking about. Lawyers are looking at the language, but again, I'm going to drive safety in the DCA airspace, and we still control it.
So you're able to keep safeguards in place even if it doesn't end up in this?
We will not have fixed wing and a helicopter cross traffic in that airspace. It's not going to happen. Yes.
I'm Public with Politico. I had a question along the same lines. There were two amendments introduced yesterday to the bill. One would strip the provision from the bill that has drawn some controversy, including from Chair Hamidi, and another would input the Voter Act. Between the current provision and the Voter Act, is there a piece of a part of legislation that you prefer?
Listen, I'm not going to engage in the legislative process. I did that part. I know the White House is engaging. I know Senator Cruz and Chair Hamidi have very strong opinions. I am just committed to making sure we keep the American flying public safe. And I'll use every tool I have to make sure they are safe. And when, again, a risk was identified when we lost those lives in the Potomac. It should have been seen before. There were 85 near misses in the 3 years before that crash. It's now known. We are not going to bring that risk back into the airspace ever. Not going to happen.
Do you think the provision as it is in the bill would increase risk in airspace?
I'm not going to comment. I'll just tell you, this is the equities that I have. We are going to use every equity to keep Americans safe.
And I also have an unrelated
third
question to the World Cup. There are a few bills in the House and the Senate that would create a dedicated grant program for DOT to administer that would give future World Cup and Olympic host cities in the U.S. Additional funds for transportation needs. Yeah. Do you support that bill? Do you support that general idea?
I haven't seen the exact language, but we're going to need additional resources, specifically for the Olympics. We're going to take assets, buses from around the country. We're not commandeering. We're going to ask cities to send us buses, and we're going to pay for the transfer of those buses to LA for the games. We'll need resources for that, and I think the Congress understands that, the White House understands that, so do we. But I think these are going to be, under President Trump, the greatest games, greatest Olympics that you'll ever see, and we've been working for 6-8 months already. First days in the office, we started to work together with the coalition on making sure these games are the best. And part of that, again, the number one issue is people have to be safe when they go to the games. Homeland Security takes the lead on that. But the second biggest issue is you have to be able to move safely and easily through the cities in which the games are being held, and that's our job. And so we'll need resources to bring in additional assets to move a massive amount of people, and we're committed to making that happen. And again, with President Trump, it'll be the best ever.
Yes. Secretary Duffy, I'm curious, you were mentioning that Republicans, Democrats all use roads, want safe roads. And I'm curious what you attribute the reasoning for why you're having this problem with Governor Newsom and Governor Hochul. What is the disagreement? What are they missing that you're seeing on this?
We'll say, and I'll just point out, these two, California and New York, account for half of the non-domiciled CDLs that were issued in the country. And I don't know if they thought it was goodwill, where I can't get in their heads why they would allow individuals to get these licenses, especially when they're not well qualified. But it's what's happening. And they have lighter positions. There's sanctuaries, many sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, wanting people to come in. But that's a different issue than keeping Americans safe on American roadways. And this point's really important. You don't just drive in New York if you get a New York commercial driver's license. You drive around the country. So if you are from my home state of Wisconsin and you think this doesn't impact you, it does, because the drivers with these licenses, these unqualified drivers, operate in every single state. And so everybody's at risk in the country, which is why this is a federal issue and why we take it so seriously.
And can you also talk about the bonuses for the 18,000 Amtrak union workers? What went into that decision?
Sure. So there was a bonus structure in place for the executives. The top executives agreed to give back half of their bonuses, and then the next tier of executives are giving back part of their bonuses as well, 40%. That gave us, I think the number is $18 million to then give a little Christmas gift back to the transit workers. So they're going to get $900. That was announced yesterday as part of a bonus for doing great work, keeping our rail operating really well.
Chase Williams with Fox Business. I think you said at the top there were 17,000 licenses taken from California. Was Governor Newsom cooperative with you guys on this? And if so, do you expect Governor Hochul to be cooperative?
I don't know. I would say cooperative. I don't think the governor's been the best partner. Again, California is the only state that's unwilling to enforce English proficiency rules. And again, we didn't create that rule. That rule has been there for a long time. Why he refuses to do that, I don't know. And then again, how you can get a license when you're not proficient in English in California begs the question, what the hell is going on in California? So a willing partner, no. But when we've held money over California's head, they have been willing to at least tell us they're working on coming into compliance. And I'm grateful for that. I wish he was willing to sit down at a table and say, let's figure this out together. How do we keep American roads safe? That's not necessarily been his position. He's kind of stomped his feet and pounded his fist, but they are starting to come into compliance, partially.
Two questions. One on Chicago. There have been some reports that they've increased police presence on transit trains since the letter you sent this week. Do you have any reaction to how Chicago and Illinois are responding? And I just want to go back to the helicopter language for a second. Do you feel confident that nothing in the NDA would bind you or require you to roll back any of the safety provisions on mixed helicopter commercial traffic?
So I've actually asked for advice from some of my more liberal friends. How do I speak liberalism? How do I become bilingual, conservative and liberal in the way I communicate? I'm not looking at fighting with Chicago or New York or DC or Boston when we talk about transit. Transit's important in these communities because if you don't have transit, you can't have everyone in a car coming into the cities. You need a public transportation system to bring people in, whether buses or subways or trains. The problem is that if Americans or the states or the cities pay for the transit system, it should be clean and it should be safe. They're not homeless shelters. And so I'm trying to use the equity that I have. I don't run the systems, but we do offer money to the systems to operate them. I'm asking, would you please up your game? Could you make it safer? Could you make it cleaner? And if you refuse, we'll withhold money. That's the only leverage I have. But I think good government would say every citizen, again, this is not partisan, Republicans and Democrats love clean trains, and they love safe trains. And if you're a liberal, I think you say, I want more people on trains. Well, the way you do that is make the experience better. If the Europeans, if Asia can do this well, why can't America do it well? And I think the answer to that is there's a whole bunch of social engineering that these cities are trying to do around transit. They should stop. There's one mission: move people, move them safely, make it clean and safe. And if you speak liberal and you can help me communicate that better to these cities, I would welcome that. But yes, what I'm doing doesn't seem to be working, and it seems to be pretty simple and pretty bipartisan. We'll do one more question.
Mr. Secretary, Zach Williams from Bloomberg Government. The hope that the New York DMV has responded similar to some of these other states in pushing back against these CDL accusations. They said every CDL we issue is subject to verification of the applicant's lawful status through federally issued documents reviewed in accordance with federal regulations. So how are they incorrect in suggesting the federal government is the one kind of dropping the ball here? And just secondly, have any federal funds been withheld from any state at this point in time on this issue?
So first, when we look at, and I'll let Derek respond to this too, the documents that they are supposed to review, even to at a fundamental level, say someone is in the country lawfully, do they have a passport? Do they have a work authorization? They're not going through, in some instances, that very basic step. So they're not verifying the legal status of the individual. So if you don't verify the legal status of the individual by a work authorization or by way of a passport, how are you telling me that you're reaching out to the federal government and it's our fault that we have given differing information? Right? That doesn't make any sense. And so, I think this is a way to try to skirt the issue. I think the real answer should be, if I was the governor of New York, I'd say, what's the problem? What do we do? I didn't set the system up maybe, or I did set it up, but how do I fix it? How do I make sure that I have the safest drivers that get licenses in New York? Let's partner together. Let's make this work. Mistakes were made. Let's remedy those mistakes, and let's get the best qualified drivers on the roadway. How do we do it? Help me out. And I'd be like, great, Governor Hochul, let's do this together. Let's hold hands and sing Christmas music and fix your system. But the response is oftentimes what you'll reference. They'll try to dodge, divert, and weave. And the problem with that is it's not taking responsibility. Take responsibility for what you have or haven't done, and then fix it. It's very simple. And I get concerned when those are the responses. Derek, I don't know if you have a...
No, just to follow to that, I mean, it's very obvious that when you go and get your driver's license, and you should not go past the times that you're supposed to be in this country. And they've systematically done that multiple times over and over again. So, and to the Secretary's point, we want to work with them. Our mission at FMCSA, too, is we want to work with our partners, and they are a partner with us. At the end of the day, it's making sure that we have safe and qualified drivers on our roadways. And going back to one of the things the Secretary mentioned was about our driver training schools, how important that is. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road. I've said that a couple of times, and I'll continue to say that over and over again, that is where we make sure that we have the best qualified drivers on our roadways. And then taking that to the driver's license agency to say, I'm proficient in these areas. I'm willing to drive these buses that are going to be taking individuals through different ball games and events that we have. So I think that's very, very important that we make sure that we start there with our driver's license agency. And then when we get to the driver's license agency one more time, is to verifying, are you supposed to be in this country legally?
And if any, has any funding been withheld from any of these states over CDL at this point in time?
No, as of yet on this issue, no, because they've come into compliance in regard to, California has, and they've been working with us, and they pulled the 17,000 licenses. We gave them 30 days and made the threat we'd pull funding. We didn't have to do that because they started to work and pull those licenses, which I think is incredibly important. And
with Pennsylvania.
Yes, yep. And again, we don't want that. I don't want to pull their licenses. And again, I think that this is very easy. Work with us. I want to make one last point, then I'm going to walk away. I promise. We're in this situation. We have this problem, not because we made a rule change. We have this problem because Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg did not enforce the law. And millions of people came into the country during their tenure, and then when they were here, these rules were still there. And they just turned a blind eye. They said, we don't care. And we saw the safety on our roadways diminish. And for us, we will not turn a blind eye. We are going to continue to work to make American roadways safe. We are going to enforce the law. We're going to hold states accountable. The last administration may not have done it, but Derek and I and this whole team and this department are going to make sure we follow the law and make sure Americans are safer today than they were under the last 4 years. President Trump gave us that directive. It is the right directive, and we are going to work every single day to make sure we get to a safer place. With that, thank you very much.